Cross River College of Health Technology workers begin warning strike over salary structure. Federal High Court orders Senator Ali Ndume to be remanded in prison over Mainez disappearance. In international news, U.S. President Trump agrees with the General Services Administration to authorize Joe Biden's formal transition process. And in sport, the Tigers arrive Rwanda ahead of 2021 AfroBasket qualifiers.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Workers at the Cross River College of Health Technology have kicked off a warning strike, protesting against the state government's suspension of the academic salary structure of the Consolidated Polytechnic and Colleges of Education. Chairman of Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics, Bright Ewuna, says the suspension of the salary structure in November last year was unwarranted. Ewuna further says the workers' salary structures were approved by the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission 10 years ago and was implemented the following year for all polytechnics, monotechnics and colleges of health technology in Nigeria. ASUP says the sudden withdrawal of these structures from the college last year after the reaccreditation of the college was unfortunate and disappointing. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has announced 56 new cases of coronavirus infections were recorded in 9 states on Monday. This means Nigeria now has 66,439 confirmed cases of coronavirus, of which 62,241 patients have recovered. This time, Kaduna State came from behind to grab the lead with 18 cases. FCT 17. Lagos recorded 6 cases, while the rest of the cases were shared among Plateau, Kano, Kwara, Yobe, Ekiti State, Niger, and Rivers. An Abuja Federal High Court has started in absentia the trial of former chairman of the defunct Pension Reform Task Team, Abdul Rashid Maina. He's been prosecuted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, on 2 billion naira money laundering charges. Justice Okon Abang has now declared him as having jumped bail because the former pension boss has failed to appear at subsequent proceedings since September. The judge had earlier revoked Maina's bail and has ordered his arrest. In an earlier ruling on Monday, the judge also ordered the remand of Mainez bail surety, Senator Ali Ndume, until he is able to produce the fleeing defendants in court or pay his 500 million naira bail bond to the federal government. Maina was again absent at the resumed hearing in the case on Tuesday. No attorney showed up in court to represent him or his company, which is charged as the second defendant. To another court case, Justice Beatrice Iliya of Gombe State High Court has petitioned the National Judicial Council, NJC, over the exclusion of her name from the list of judges to be considered for appointment as Chief Judge of Gombe State. Meanwhile, President of the Nigerian Bar Association, Olumide Akpata, says in reaction to Iliya's exclusion, the NJC should stamp out discrimination in the country's judiciary. Justice Iliya contends the omission of her name from the list sent to the NJC by the Gombe State Judicial Service Commission was a violation of the NJC directive on the appointment of a chief judge. She says as the most senior judge on the Gombe State High Court bench, there was no justification for her name not to be sent to the NJC. Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, has entered its second recession in 5 years in the third quarter of this year. Latest figures by the National Bureau of Statistics show Nigeria's inflation rate has climbed to a 30-month high since its land borders were shut. The situation has worsened with the emergence of the coronavirus, which has affected the global economy. Correspondent Kelechi Mekala reports.
Nigerians are enduring tough times as cost of food, transportation and several other services continue to rise due to soaring inflation. Latest figures show a 0.52% increase from 13.71% recorded in September. Nigeria's inflation has been rising since the nation shut its borders. The situation has further been exacerbated by the coronavirus-induced disruptions. Experts project it could get even worse.
It's worrying because if you combine that to revenue shrink, government is not increasing the revenue, and so what we're going to see is maybe at some point some kind of stagflation when inflation is very high, and of course revenue is low. So the deficit increases. It will impact on welfare, on socioeconomic welfare. It will escalate. It will increase the poverty level and the social insecurity and criminality that go with it. So primarily, this is depressing. This is not good. As we go into the Christmas period, we're going to expect maybe greater increase in prices and the impact on household.
Government's efforts like stimulus and intervention funds have remained inadequate. And experts suggest the government should explore other options.
Everything government has done, none of them have been very effective because the increase in inflation rate is a reflection of the system-wide economic situation. The fact that we are not producing, our revenue is low, our productivity is low, and prices are going up. I think this is the right time to maybe loosen the border closure to allow for cheaper food, rice and others to come to the country.
The World Bank projects that Nigeria could be facing its worst recession in more than 4 decades, all painting a grim picture of the West African nation's economy. With the second wave of the coronavirus sweeping across nations, government would need to take concrete steps to mitigate against the collapse of the economy. But in the meantime, Nigerians would have to brace up for even more precarious times.
Coming up, African stories. United Nations begins gradual troop drawdown in the DRC. And later, international news. US President Trump agrees with the General Services Administration to authorize Joe Biden's formal transition process.
You are watching ANN.
Susu is fine. No, she's not crying, oh. But we are watching cartoon. Ask grandma, I'm the one that used to take care of Yabo that time. Take your time. I will call you back. Your daddy is calling.
Explore without limits. Turn it up on MTN, the reliable data network.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Talks about an eventual withdrawal of the United Nations peacekeeping force in the Democratic Republic of the Congo began gaining momentum a year ago. The 16,000-strong force, known as MONUSCO, may be reassigned to other missions, but for now, the drawdown from the DRC has begun. Correspondent Christopher Kamringa has the story.
UN troops were deployed to the DRC in 1999 to oversee a ceasefire in a conflict that left more than 5 million people dead. Their mandate is to protect civilians and support the DRC government to stabilize the country. But conflicts have continued in eastern DRC. The UN estimates there are more than 100 armed groups fighting over land and the control of mineral resources. The UN Secretary General has now proposed a plan to start the gradual withdrawal of troops.
The first step, I would say, to this drawdown is to leave Kasai, the Kasai provinces. The military presence there has just finished end of October, so just a few days ago, to be replaced temporarily by a strengthened police presence in the Kasai. 300 police are now being deployed and will stay there until June 2021, which is when we aim at closing Kasai, our presence in Kasai. Then in 2022, we aim again at closing or at reducing our presence in Tanganyika province to concentrate and focus our efforts on the 3 remaining provinces that are where the conflict is the most complex and where the situation is the most difficult. That's Ituri province and North and South Kivu.
The peacekeeping mission known as MONUSCO came under sharp criticism last year for failing to protect civilians from rebels in the eastern city of Beni. Some Congolese citizens are happy the troops will start leaving the country.
It has been long. We have been waiting for the withdrawal of those troops, but since the Secretary General is now committed to doing it, I think that's like we have been waiting for a kid to be born. Now we think this is the right time because they had delayed so far.
The UN peacekeepers' gradual withdrawal comes at a time when attacks against civilians in the east and the northeast have increased. This security analyst in Kinshasa believes it's time for the UN troops to start leaving the country.
Oui, la MONUSCO est dans notre pays depuis plus de 20 ans.
MONUSCO has been in our country for more than 20 years. We have been following their operations, but we still see a big problem in the execution of their mandate to protect civilians. I personally haven't seen how MONUSCO has been protecting civilians. I think it's time for them to allow the Congolese government to handle its responsibility.
Last year, the Congolese army launched an offensive against armed groups like the Allied Democratic Forces. The ADF has been accused of killing many civilians in eastern DRC, but the army crackdown has resulted in retaliatory attacks against civilians.
The UN peacekeeping mission is the largest and 3rd most expensive in the world. The troops have been trying to pacify the east of the country for 2 decades but haven't been successful. The DRC president believes it's time for the UN troops to start gradually leaving his country. He's asked the UN to support the Congolese army to take over the role of protecting civilians.
In efforts to revive the worst-hit sectors of the Uganda economy, Stanbic Bank Uganda has partnered with the United Nations and other funding agencies to create an enterprise fund that will provide low-cost financing to informal sector businesses to enable them to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Enterprise Fund will provide low-cost financing to the informal sector businesses to enable them recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It targets savings and credit cooperatives as well as village savings and credit associations to enhance their productivity and provide both digital and technical support in capacity building and institutional development.
In the comfort of your home or your market stall or your shop or wherever you are, you can apply for a facility through your circle and the funding will be disbursed onto your phone, but the reverse is also true. And the third and equally important is the training part, because many a time we throw money at problems, or it's just a question of funding. Fund them, they'll be fine. And we've found that sadly that's not true.
The agricultural sector, which is often shunned by the commercial banks in the provisions of loans due to their high-risk profile, is catered for in the facility.
COVID has been able to sort us out and show us which are the real economy and which one is vulnerable economy. If you follow closely, it has been proven that agriculture can never be a vulnerable economy. It's a real economy. So if you're not investing now to the real economy, even as banks, you are at risk of investing in a vulnerable economy.
The new type of partnership between the United Nations and Stanbic Bank to adapt and respond to the impact of COVID-19 on the most vulnerable sectors of the economy is lauded by government.
We as government, we stand with you, and we in particular as a ministry, we look forward to working closely together with you in ensuring that this project emerges as a successful project for other institutions to emulate.
Even with the easing of the lockdown, the micro and small-scale operators, worst hit by the coronavirus prevention measures, continue to suffer from the reduced product demand and lack of operating capital to meet the daily costs of operations.
When we return, international news. U.S. President Trump agrees with the General Services Administration to authorize Joe Biden's formal transition process. And later, sports. The Tigers arrive Rwanda ahead of 2021 AfroBasket qualifiers.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. There is a thaw in America's frozen transitional process that should have begun 3 weeks ago after the U.S. presidential elections were concluded. The losing candidate, incumbent President Donald Trump, has now agreed that President-elect Joe Biden's transition can now begin. To that effect, Administrator of the U.S. General Services Administration, Emily Murphy, a Trump appointee, has now formally designated Joe Biden as the apparent winner of the presidential election. With that, federal funds, more than $6 million, will now be released to the Biden campaign to begin an official transition. Murphy explained her delay in approving the transition process by saying she wanted the constitutional process of vote counting and picking a president to work its course. President Trump, who has been rejecting the election results for more than 2 weeks now and had been claiming the election was rigged and fraught with voter fraud, tweeted on Monday night he accepted Murphy's decision but vowed to continue his legal challenges to the election results. Germans are pondering the wisdom in allowing schools to stay open while the general public is on lockdown as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Opinions are mixed as some students complain about crowded classrooms that reflect no COVID-19 measures. Correspondent Evangelos Pipsas reports from Berlin.
For Odysseus, getting ready early in the morning, preparing his school bag, and packing a mask has become the new norm. When arriving to Max Planck High School in Berlin's Mitte neighborhood, the 14-year-old follows all the measures put in place to curb the spread of coronavirus. First and foremost, the wearing of a mask before entering the premises. And although social distancing and wearing a mask also applies while in class, enforcing the measures is proving difficult.
Wir sind 32 Kinder in einer Klasse.
In the class, it's just like before. It's super full and really overcrowded. It's actually like before, as if there was no coronavirus. We are 32 children in class and all the classes are way too crowded.
Earlier this month, the German government imposed a 4-week partial nationwide lockdown, shuttering bars, restaurants and theaters, but schools have been kept open. This decision by Chancellor Angela Merkel's federal administration to allow schools to run at full capacity has drawn criticism from some parents, while others stand by the decision as vital for young people's future.
I'm not really scared that my child is going to be sick himself or be in danger, but I am scared that he's going to bring the virus at home and let's say give it to us or my parents, the older ones, and this is gonna be quite dangerous.
we have to see that measurements against infections on the one hand are very important, but on the other hand we have not only the right to education for every person, but we have as well many things that just young people need in order to develop in a good way. We are social beings, so we have to interact, we have to meet.
For many schools across the country, this is a fine line between protecting the health of staff and students and educational development. For many, it's a tough battle to contend with. Berlin's regional leader stands by the federal government's decision, but the largest body representing teachers in the country believes this is a mistake.
Es gibt eine klare Empfehlung des Robert-Koch-Instituts.
There is a clear recommendation from the Robert Koch Institute that if there are 15 new infections per 100,000 in a week, distance rules must apply again. That means halved classes. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in any region that has a high number of infections.
It has been a crushing year for education. From political disagreements to a virus that continues to disrupt the classroom, what parents, teachers, and students hope is for some stability during uncertain times ahead.
Mexico has now legalized recreational marijuana. Lawmakers have finalized rules for its commercial trade, but doubts remain over how the legislation will help eliminate marijuana crimes. Correspondent Alice Dyer Beverstock has the story.
Mexico's Senate, in the heart of the country's capital, perhaps the last place you'd expect to find a rather large plantation of marijuana. The plants were put here by an activist group seeking to influence new legislation that now legalizes recreational marijuana in Mexico.
Marijuana is a very difficult subject to talk about in Mexico, given the current prohibition laws and drug-related violence. So this is how we're trying to educate society.
The plantation has achieved its goal. The vote passed the upper house with 82 votes in favour, 18 against.
Mexico's legalization laws allow for up to 8 plants to be cultivated at home for personal use, and people will be able to carry up to 28 grams of marijuana. However, there are still financial fines for carrying between 28 and 200 grams and criminal charges for anything more.
And that's a problem for those who have pushed for an end to prohibition.
If you leave some of these activities as subject to criminal prosecution, that's exactly what criminal organizations want, precisely because they are the only ones that are willing to run the risk of criminal prosecution.
Juan Francisco Torres Landa is a founding member of Mexico United Against Crime, an NGO who achieved a ruling in the Supreme Court that prohibition of marijuana was unconstitutional, which led to the Senate being ordered to draw up this legislation. His group pushed for full decriminalization, with the ultimate goal of cutting the profits of organized crime. But for those who don't want to grow their own, they may still have to buy from the gangsters.
For the case of local production, they're incorporating a number of obstacles, such as genetic codes and some other technical requirements that if you ask a peasant, a farmer, they'll say, "What? I have no idea what you're talking about." So by doing that, they will alienate the small farmers and small production that they do it anyway right now, and instead of incorporating them into the legal structure that would work, they're sort of pushing them back again in the control of organized crime.
As Mexico becomes the world's largest country to legalize marijuana nationwide, whether it can put a dent in the drug cartels that have dominated this market for decades remains to be seen.
Up next, sport. The Tigers arrive Rwanda ahead of 2021 AfroBasket qualifiers. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network. in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sports, the Tigers team members are observing a 24-hour self-isolation after arriving in Rwanda's capital, Kigali, on Monday. They are there to participate in the 2021 AfroBasket qualifiers. The games are scheduled to start on Wednesday, but Nigeria would face South Sudan in their opening game on Thursday. Nigeria Women Football League have threatened to relegate clubs that do not meet up with the registration deadline. 3 clubs, Queens of Akure Sunshine, Heartland Queens of Owerri, and Dream Stars of Lagos, are yet to comply with the licensing and registration procedures for the 2020-2021 NWFL Premiership season. Only 13 Premiership clubs that beat the late November deadline are set to be licensed in the ongoing registration to participate in the 2021 NWFL Premiership season. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.